Why does luck exist in games? Why aren't they all just skill-based? Luck and randomness tend to get a bad rap in video games. Just look at the burning hatred most players feel towards things like tripping in Smash Bros. Or drawing a bad deck in Hearthstone. After all, games should be a challenge of skill rather than chance, right? Well, let's not be too quick to judge, because having luck in games is pretty much inevitable. Most definitions of what a game even is state that an element of indeterminacy or uncertainty is fundamental to what makes games games. Chance can be a fundamental part of skill-based game design, whether it's the procedurally generated levels in Don't Starve or the luck of the draw in poker. Luck lets players blame losses on chance and wins on skill, which keeps everyone happy and coming back for more.
That was a quivering pile of not fun.
Because without the element of indeterminacy or uncertainty, we'd all just be playing games that are essentially just measurements, like who's taller or who owns more cats. Chance isn't the opposite of skill either. As Magic the Gathering designer Richard Garfield says, luck is more like an interaction between a player and the game's rules, because there are many different kinds of luck and not all of them are based on randomness or even necessarily a design choice. Most grievances about luck in games can be attributed to random number generators, like rolling a die or drawing cards from a deck, and randomness cannot be counteracted by skill or experience, which explains all those pissed off players. However, it's important to note that even random number generators have their purpose, often adding risk management mechanics to games like XCOM or Persona. But the more fundamental and unavoidable variable of luck in games is actually you, the player. Human beings are unpredictable, so when they interact with the rules of the game, no matter how skilled or precise, we bring that essential element of indeterminacy to games. The most recognizable form of this is called luck execution, which describes the uncontrollable variable of human fault. As Elliot Grant, a developer from the highly skill-based game Prismata, says, luck execution is statistically inevitable. Why? Well, skill is imperfect. Even if you get headshots 70 to 90% of the time, which is ridiculously good, you're going to miss the remaining percentage no matter what, because you are simply not a robot. Yeah. Human limitations will always make the outcome of a game uncertain, whether through the mental limitation of memory in chess or the physical limitation of accurately accounting for wind speed and direction in golf. Of course, players can gain experience to minimize luck execution, but it's always a factor, no matter how good a player gets, and will always lead to failure that is outside his or her control. Take basketball, for instance. Over time, even Michael Jordan will miss some free throws because of shifting tectonic plates or the sweat on his hands, or because a butterfly flapped its wings somewhere. Whatever the reason, it doesn't mean he's a worse player. It just means he's human. The variable of human performance might sound like a skill rather than luck problem, but that's because those two things aren't as black and white as we tend to think. Richard Garfield suggests that instead of seeing it as skill-based games versus luck-based games, we should look at it more as a balancing of the interaction between the two. All games fall somewhere under this graph, where luck and skill go hand in hand together. It's less of a dichotomy and more of a spectrum. Take a game like Dark Souls, for example, which is credited for being one of the most skill-based games ever. Even though many would say it's low luck, it hasn't gotten rid of chance entirely. Of course, skill is essential to getting more consistent results and progressing through the game, but luck execution is a reality for even the greatest Dark Souls players. And this variable of human performance is exactly what makes Dark Souls so tense. Statistically speaking, you will die. Not because of booby-trapped chess or try-jumping, but because the chances of you accurately predicting and knowing how to perfectly handle every moment-to-moment fight and interaction in the game is infinitesimally small. Even still, players blame themselves for dying because of a supposed lack of skill. But in reality, there's always a certain amount of luck in encountering any creature, be it one you can figure out instantly and kill, or one you don't understand that kills you. What makes this luck is that these encounters are different for everyone. Just because you get killed by the first creature in a seemingly skill-based scenario doesn't mean other players will die as well. In fact, they may succeed victoriously. And for even the best Dark Souls players, you're going to get unlucky and always run into something beyond your skill. From this perspective then, even Dark Souls, the most skill-based of skill-based games, uses luck in order to achieve its design goals. Only instead of other games like Mario Kart, where luck is more of an equalizer, Dark Souls uses luck to make you feel worse about yourself. ultimately, looking at the balance between skill and luck in games tells you a lot about your designer's intentions. Mario Kart is meant to be enjoyed by everyone, so the blue shell was implemented in the N64 version to make races exhilarating right up until the finish line, regardless of skill. Meanwhile, Dark Souls wants you to feel challenged, so instead of chance, block, randomness, it makes you run up against your own natural limitations. Instead of thinking of luck in games as just the blue shell in Mario Kart, we should see it as the human element that makes games so great. It's why watching any old person play Jeopardy is way more entertaining than watching Watson just get every question right. Luck is a fundamental part of games because we're a fundamental part of games. By picking up a controller or moving a chess piece, we bring that unpredictable spark.
Those odds were absurd.
But what do you think? Is luck a fundamental part of games, or is skill what truly makes them sing? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week we talked about sex, side shadowing, expectation, and narrative in The Witcher 3. Let's see what some of you had to say. Earthen Fist said that side shadowing in The Witcher 3 and also in games like Mass Effect 3, which some of you mentioned in the comments, are a great sign that games are actually maturing, which I think is 100% accurate. I think it's really important, obviously, that games look outside of the medium itself, and anytime game designers can use techniques like side shadowing and pull them from other narrative contexts, it's a really, really good sign that, games are having this conversation with other things aside from themselves. LitCrit is not convinced by the sex scenes in The Witcher 3. Frankly, they find them to be completely unbelievable. So not just in The Witcher 3, but by extension, the entire franchise. We actually did an entire episode about sex in video games. We'll link to it in the description, specifically why it's so bad. And one of the big conclusions that we came to is that, sex is often used in games as some kind of reward, like in the series God of War, for example. It's some kind of, it's the carrot at the end of the stick to get you to go do something or achieve something in the game. And that's why people really enjoy or sort of find meaning in games like The Witcher and Mass Effect 3, because it gives some context to the activity that's happening on screen, just like in real life. So I understand that there's an uncanny valley effect in terms of watching these characters engage in sexual activity that doesn't really, it's not as realistic perhaps as real life. However, I do think that these experiments with different types of narrative techniques does allow for the possibility for actual context to things like sex in The Witcher 3 that hopefully will be really important and actually mean something for us someday.